NBA free agency is finally here. It's finally that time of the year as we approach next season, right? But it is a place where players can leave their former teams, go elsewhere, whether that's for opportunity, more money, or both, right? But at the same time, it's the last time where these NBA teams and franchises can really go out there and fill their biggest weaknesses going into the new year. It's one of the best times of the year, and it kicks off all tomorrow evening at 6 p.m., I believe. We'll get into that in here just a second. But before we get into that, we're on the road to 500 subs on the channel. I mean, we've been doing this for about 9 to 10 months, 4 uploads a week. I mean, help us get to 500 subs. We're grinding for you guys, nonstop, great content. And we can't get there to this next big milestone without you guys. But without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. This is Owen. Let's get into it. Now, as I mentioned, NBA free agency will kick off tomorrow, Friday, June 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern. And this is, I believe, the moratorium period where teams can start negotiating deals with the free agency players, and those deals won't become official until July 6th or after that date. But between tomorrow and July 6th, all deals can be agreed upon but are not binding agreements. So these are just verbal agreements between the teams and the players that they will sign on July 6th or later. But a handful of teams that do have significant cap space are the Houston Rockets. I mean, they have far and away the most. We'll look into that in here just a second. But the San Antonio Spurs, the Sacramento Kings, the Indiana Pacers are all teams that this year will have more money than others. But other teams around the league that don't have as much money, well, they're going to have to do some juggling with the new cap space as the new collective bargaining agreement takes effect on Saturday. And that's going to affect how much these teams can bring back, right, as far as money. But a lot of teams, whether if it's restricted free agency or just trying to fill some voids at a cheaper price, these teams are going to have to do some juggling with the cap space. So let's see how cap wizard these teams are going into the future. But let's look at what we know so far going into the offseason and until free agency, But Nikola Vucevic and the Chicago Bulls are finalizing a 3-year, $60 million extension. Jakob Poeltl is expected to re-sign with the Toronto Raptors for upwards of $20 million a year. The Pistons will pick up Alec Burks' $10.5 million option. That's very interesting, but I guess the mid-level exception is now $12 million or so, so they're going to get him at a cheaper price than they would in free agency. But Victor Oladipo, after his knee injury, hopefully he's resting up well, he is going to return to the Miami Heat after accepting his $9.5 million player option. Minnesota will decline Taurean Prince's $7.5 million option, which he found out via Twitter. So kind of crazy that stuff still works that way. It's a business. You would think they would operate that way. But Sacramento, in a kind of a surprising move, but they're going to accept the $2 million option on Kessler Edwards, a guy that hasn't showed a ton in his early career, but they might see something that we don't. And he's coming back on a very cheap deal. And the last bit of news is that the Clippers, they won't accept Eric Gordon's $21 million option. He's set to become a free agent, and somehow, some way, right? I don't know how this happens. Let me know down in the comments. But this move is going to allow the Clippers to save $110 million in luxury tax. I'm not too sure how that works just because I believe he was on the last year of his deal. I don't know, right? I'm not a cap wizard, but for some reason, that's going to save the Clippers a heck of a lot of money. But moving over here, I made this graphic last night just to show you guys the updated salary cap around the league ahead of free agency. As you see, Houston, Indy, San Antonio are up at the top of that list. And then you see teams at the bottom like Golden State, the Clippers, Milwaukee, the Lakers. These are teams that are going to have to budget their money a bit more than others, right? But this is also not including the cap holds. This is just the projected salary cap for each team. The number you see in each box is, of course, in $1 million, right? So, for example, the Houston Rockets have $50.7 million, etc., etc. But I will say the only thing that's changed overnight here is that the Clippers moved up 2 spots, right, as they've passed the Bucks and the Lakers. Not a big difference. But after that Eric Gordon move, they moved up a couple spots. So as you have a quick look at this, I'll give you guys 5 or 10 more seconds to see where your team is at. But let's get into it. As these first couple moves, I'm going to say right off bat, it's going to be boring to start this, but it gets more interesting moving on. But James Harden, I believe he will return to the Philadelphia 76ers. You see on the left box in the bottom left, that is his last team. On the right side, it's his next best option. But in the middle is the team I believe he will sign to, and that is the Philadelphia 76ers. And if you asked me this, to predict James Harden just a few weeks ago, I'd say James Harden is returning home, and he's going to be a Houston Rocket with that young core. But all the rumors to me point to James Harden returning to Philadelphia, running it back with Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris and Tyrese Maxey in that core with their new head coach in Nick Nurse, right? So that's going to be a different element that we're going to see this year. But Philadelphia, they can do everything. They can pay him, and they're going to be in the best position to compete at a high level. So, it's going to check all the boxes there for James Harden. But I wouldn't be surprised, right? I wouldn't be surprised if this is not a 4-year deal, and this is like a 2+1, right? Where it's a 2-year, and then the third year is a player option. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case moving forward with James Harden, as he is getting up there in age, and his production is not there like it was, let's say, in 2018 with the Houston Rockets. But it will be a big year for Philadelphia, right? Because if they fall short again in the playoffs, if they don't at least make it to the finals or win the Eastern Conference, Harder, he's only getting older. He's going to be on a shorter deal in this case. I believe Tobias Harris is going to be up for free agency. Joel Embiid might get even more frustrated. This team isn't getting over the hump. It's just something to look at for Philadelphia fans. I'm not trying to scare you, but it just could be the reality in a year or two that this team could fall apart. But Kyrie Irving, the second best free agent in my mind, and I think he's going to return to the Dallas Mavericks, right? As unpredictable as Kyrie is, and as much as the Cavs fan in me wants to see a reunion with LeBron in LA, I believe Kyrie will re-sign in Dallas as they try to figure out the rest of this roster, try to fill out the rest of the roster around that dynamic backcourt. But Kyrie to me is still a top 5 point guard in the game, and I expect Luka to come into this year with a chip on his shoulder, a little peed off, right, as he feels like he might have something to prove as they missed the playoffs last year. But, that alone, right, can make them a playoff team, is having Kyrie resign and Luka coming back with something he thinks he has to prove. That alone might make them a playoff team, but to put them over the hump, make them a contender, they need to fill out the rest of this roster, right, and that's no surprise to anybody. But can you imagine, just quickly here as a side rant, a Kyrie, LeBron, and Anthony Davis team? That would be dangerous, right? And to me as a Cavs fan, I'd love to see that dynamic duo pair up just one more time before LeBron hangs it up. But I also wouldn't mind a Miami Heat fit, right, with Kyrie Irving. But it seems like no shocker there. The Miami Heat are more focused on Damian Lillard than Kyrie Irving at the current moment. Chris Middleton, I believe he's going to return to the Milwaukee Bucks, right? No surprise here. But Cash Money Chris, he declined his $40 million player option to explore free agency, right? But he's another player where I don't expect much to change, to be completely honest. I expect him to explore his options in free agency, as he should. Maybe he flirts with the idea of teaming up with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic in Dallas, right? How would they make that work financially? I'm not too sure. But, it would be an awesome fit, to be honest, right? You would have Kyrie, Luka Doncic, and then Chris Middleton, a wing that they desperately need that can play the two-way, shoot the three-ball at a high clip. That would be perfect for Dallas, right? But with that not really being a real possibility, I believe at the end of the day, Chris Middleton's going to return to this Bucks team in a big way, right? And let me explain, because I believe he's going to return on a longer-term deal, give him more financial stability going forward. But I believe it will be a team-friendly deal. He might not ask for $40 million a year. It might be like a 25 to 30 a year, but for 4 or 5 years, right? So he's getting the money over, it's stretched out is a way to put it. But hey, if he does that, they can continue to add to this roster and continue to be one of the top contenders in the league. Let's not, they're going to be with Giannis on the roster, but I believe if he takes a team-friendly deal, they can only add to this roster. But Draymond Green, a guy that I expect to return to the Golden State Warriors, right? So 4 players in, no changes, and I know this might be boring, but that's just how the top of this class has lined up. And don't worry, we do have some players getting some changes here coming up here pretty soon. But for Draymond Green, I don't believe any other place makes sense visually, right? This is a guy that's been a Warrior for 12 years. He's won 4 championships, a couple Defensive Player of the Years. Very decorated career, right? And one day he's going to have number 23, Draymond Green. He's going to have his jersey retired in Golden State. But in Draymond's words, right? You can't just throw that away. I expect him to return and finish his career as a Warrior in Golden State. Now, would it be overpaid given his production has even taken a step back and his age? Yes, he would be overpaid. But you get that luxury when you're past your prime, when you've done all you have for the city and and the team, right, as far as success, like Draymond Green. I mean, you get everything, right, until you retire, given how much he's given to his franchise. But there's always a 1% chance that he acknowledges his glorious king LeBron James and ships it over there to LA to join the Lakers. But to me, he's a Warrior for life. Let's not overthink it, right? Draymond Green will be back in the blue and gold going into next season. Kyle Kuzma is another guy that he's going to change teams. He's the first guy in this video to change teams. And I believe a fit with Indianapolis is a fit that, fits. It works for both sides. I'll put it that way, right? This is a guy in Kyle Kuzma, just averaged 21 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists a game. So you can only imagine if you pair him with a big-time playmaker in Tyrese Halliburton there in Indianapolis, that his scoring numbers would only go up, right? His play overall, offensively at least, would only go up, right? I mean, we could be looking at a 25-point-per-game score there in Indy if he's paired with a Tyrese Halliburton. And not to mention, I mean, if his job is easier offensively, where he just kind of is put in the right spots all the time, maybe he gives you more effort defensively, and he becomes an even more dynamic player. But Kyle Kuzma is very interesting to me. I can see a Cleveland fit. I could see a Utah fit, a Sacramento fit. But, to me, it's very rare you find a two-way wing at his size that can score the way Kuzma can. So that's the reason I can see so many different possibilities with Kyle Kuzma. But to me, a fit in Indy would make a lot of sense. Fred VanVleet, excuse me. He's the next guy, and I have him going to the Houston Rockets. And this is a situation where money is just key, right? As Houston has far and away the most money out of any team this offseason, and they are desperately in the need for a veteran presence in their locker room for their younger players, right? So given that their younger players can grow and mature a little bit, Fred VanVleet does that, right? And this Houston Rockets team has been linked to giving Fred VanVleet, per reports, a 2-year, $80 million deal, which is absolutely insane. It would make him one of the highest paid players in the league. But, I mean, Houston has the money, and right now they don't need to spend it elsewhere. So why not get a veteran presence that can help you more so in the long run than the short term? And I will say on paper, I mean, this fit is going to be a little awkward with Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, Fred VanVleet. But again, this move is more so going to be to have a steady veteran presence in the locker room that can help these young guys grow into their own on and off the court. Right? I believe it works for both sides. Fred VanVleet, he gets his money. He can kind of prove himself, build his reputation back up around the league. And Houston's going to get a veteran that, that they can pay a lot of money to now, but in 2 years they can let him go and pay the Jalen Greens of the world, the Senguns of the world, their younger talent that they don't need an extension for a couple years, right? So I believe it makes a lot of sense financially and just fit-wise going into the next year or two. Jeremy Grant, I have going to the Sacramento Kings, and this is more so a hope to me that this is the first domino that falls. I hope this is the first alert that we get on our phones when free agency starts. I hope we get a Jeremy Grant signs with the Sacramento Kings because, one, it would change the Dame situation. I believe Dame would want his way out of Portland if they can't bring a guy like Jeremy Grant back, and I believe it's such a good fit. I believe Jeremy Grant to Sacramento is truly a perfect fit, right? He can slide right into the starting lineup, whether if it's at the 3 or 4, and he can guard the other team's best player. He can still run in transition at the fast pace that Sacramento loves to play at, and he can still hit the 3 and create his own shot when he needs to, right? And I believe that's the most underrated part to his game, is creating his own shot. But I don't believe that he's not necessarily going to have to do that here in Sacramento, right? I believe Jeremy Grant and Mike Brown they were made for each other as the player coach as far as talent and scheme. But Jeremy Grant, hypothetically, right, let's put it this way. You can have lineups where you have De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Jeremy Grant, right, Keegan Murray, and then you can throw in Domantas Sabonis at the 5, right? Or you can have any variation of that, or you can throw in a Davion Mitchell into that lineup, or you can throw in a Harrison Barnes in that lineup if you bring it back. This move brings them a lot of versatility, but I think a Jeremy Grant next to Domantas Sabonis would be awesome for this Kings team moving forward. Austin Reeves, I believe he returns as a Laker next season, right? This is a Lakers team that went from saying they wouldn't match any offer over $100 million for Austin Reeves to pretty much saying that they'd match anything, right? So this Lakers team has kind of come to the realization that they want to keep this young core together, and this is a guy that had an amazing second half of the year, right? The Lakers, we know, had a terrible start to the season. After the trade deadline, when they made a bunch of moves, they started to turn things around, and a big part of that was Austin Reeves, right? He was given more of a role, given more responsibility, and he played up to that level. But sure, I mean, Austin Reeves, his overall numbers aren't the greatest if you look at his numbers on paper, but I believe when you really break it down and you look at the sample size of the second half of the year, including the playoffs, I believe, visually in the eye test, you see what you're getting. As this is a guy that's a reliable scorer and reliable shot creator, right? No matter where his rotation is, whether if he's a sixth man or starting in the starting lineup, this is a guy that can take the pressure off of LeBron, off of Anthony Davis at times, and keep this team relevant in the times where their stars aren't on the court or their stars are cold. Right? This is a guy in Austin Reeves that showed a lot of promise last year, and there's no real other option for LA, as Kyrie's most likely not coming back to this Los Angeles team, or not coming back, but he's not going to sign with the Los Angeles team given their money situation and all that. So their number one priority this offseason should be to, one, keep LeBron happy, but in doing so, you have to bring a guy like Austin Reeves back into the team and give him his money, right? Bring these young guys back like Rui, like Austin Reeves, and build from there, right? Maybe Austin Reeves can get even more. He can build his reputation up even more and then go trade him at the trade deadline. Not that would be a smart move, but it would be a move that LeBron might make here to get his fifth ring, right? Cam Johnson is another guy that's, look, I would love to see a reunion with Monty Williams in Detroit. And if money, for restricted free agency wasn't a thing, I would have Detroit as his location here. I believe he would fit perfectly there with Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and, the front court that they have there in Detroit. But to me, I believe Brooklyn would do anything in their power to match Cam Johnson's deal. And strictly because of that fact, I believe he's going to return to Brooklyn, as they continue to rebuild this team and the image of Brooklyn after the Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie fallout. But, Cam Johnson's still a very talented younger wing, even though he came into the league a bit older. But I'm just happy he's going to be getting his money. No matter how you split it, right? Whether Detroit overpays him or Brooklyn retains him, he's going to get over $100 million. So shout out to Cam Johnson, big difference there in player. But he's going to get his money, right? Russell Westbrook, a guard that, Hall of Famer, first ballot, no doubt in anybody's mind, right? But this is a guy that I believe should return to the LA Clippers. I know the Clippers have been looking to make a splash this offseason. They've been contemplating, do we bring back the core of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George? That's a question Steve Ballmer's been trying to ask himself, and I believe sometimes all you need is right in front of you, right? Sometimes you just need to bring it back and hope that you can stay healthy. I know that that's kind of been the recipe for this Clippers team in this era is kind of, we have the talent, let's just bring it back, maybe bring in a couple different pieces, shuffle some pieces around, and then just have the same overall core that can't stay healthy when it matters most. But to me, you got to bring back Russell Westbrook, right? Russell, I think he personally needs to resign with the Clippers. This is a guy that he went to the Clippers, and his play with the Clippers in the second half of the year, it helped build his personal image up right around the league, as he was kind of looked at as, when he got cut from the Lakers, it was kind of like will he have another job in the NBA? And not cut, but traded from the Lakers. It was like, is Russ going to be picked up from any team in the NBA? It was to that level, of the Carmelo Anthony level, where people were like, yeah, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he won't fit with our team going forward. He won't make our team better. Russell went to the Clippers. Him and Ty Lue figured out how to be dynamic and effective on the court, and man, did he help that Clippers team in the second half of the year. But to me, not to mention, Paul George, one of the star players for the Clippers. He also loves Russell Westbrook, So, it's always good to make your stars happy. But at the end of the day, this is the last year of this Clippers core to me. And if they can't stay healthy, or if they can't win a championship next offseason, we're gonna see an explosion in LA, right, for the Clippers. And I think it's going to turn out just a Brooklyn situation, right, where Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie, they were in a position to once succeed and dominate the league like this Clippers team was. But they just couldn't get it done, so they split it up, and they got a lot of draft capital to rebuild in a sense, right? And it'll be very interesting to see where a guy like Kawhi Leonard would end up if he gets traded. But Brook Lopez at the center position, one of the first true centers here that we've had to talk about. But to me, there's no other real option. He returns to Milwaukee. But in case that they, for some reason, don't want to pay him or don't bring him back, or maybe they just want to give Bobby Portis more responsibility and more minutes, so they slide up to the 5 in the starting lineup, I wouldn't mind a New York fit, right, where he goes there and has he's going to be a nice rim protector for Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, and Jalen Brunson. But I think he's also, the best part of his game is that he's going to stretch the floor for those guys offensively, be a nice pick and roll, pick and pop partner there with Jalen Brunson. But I think at the end of the day, he's going to return to Milwaukee on probably a team-friendly deal, again, to help them continue to build the rest of this roster and to chase championships. Because at the end of the day, you have maybe the best player in the world in Giannis Antetokounmpo on your team, and all you need to do is get to the championship. Because we saw when he got to the finals last time, he had one of the best final individual performances we've seen in NBA history. Let's not quickly forget the type of player that Giannis is in this game, right? But Rui Hachimura, he's another guy that he's going to return to the Lakers. I don't even have another option for him, because if the Lakers don't bring him back, they would just be stupid. Just like Austin Reeves, Rui will be back in a Lakers uniform next season, no matter the cost of it, right? But I believe the Lakers, they're in a spot where they need young talent because their stars are getting older. Even some of their surrounding pieces have gotten older. They need some younger talent. And two great players, kind of just fell into their lap last season. Rui was traded for not much from the Wizards to the Lakers last year, and then Austin Reeves kind of came out of nowhere, right? So these are two young great players that they can use to build on for the future, regardless of where LeBron goes after this next year. But Rui brings great two-way ability, and you can only imagine that with more opportunity, his game does grow, and given more confidence, right, instilled into him, his game should grow with Darvin Ham. Christian Wood. And this is more so of an interesting move, but this piggybacks off of my KP, Kristaps Porzingis prediction to the Charlotte Hornets that I made a few weeks back. But Christian Wood, he's a guy that could be a stretch 4 or stretch 5 for this Charlotte team, next to Nick Richards in some lineups. But if this team plans to let PJ Washington walk in free agency, they can bring back Christian Wood. He's going to be cheaper. He might be even more versatile than a guy like PJ Washington. And I can only imagine, a pick and roll or pick and pop with a guy like LaMelo Ball or Christian Wood and a LaMelo Ball connection there on the court would be dominant. I believe going to a situation like Charlotte would, one, be a change of scenery for Christian Wood. But I believe, they can get him relatively cheaper than PJ Washington. And maybe we can get back to seeing the Christian Wood that we saw five or so years ago, where we thought, man, all Houston needs is a guy like Christian Wood next to James Harden, and they can win a championship, right? So maybe we can see that version, the Detroit version of Christian Wood going forward, especially in a situation like Charlotte, where that would be a perfect fit for him, in my opinion. The next guy I want to talk about is Harrison Barnes, a solid veteran wing, a champion wing, right? But to me, he's going to return to the Sacramento Kings, and he's the first wing that, to me, as a Cavs fan, I believe we have a real chance of getting, but the Cavs aren't built like that, right? We need a 3, but we're not going to get anybody, and we're going to roll out next year with the same lineup we had this year. But to me, Harrison Barnes played solid for the Kings last year, did exactly what they needed, exactly what they wanted. And why fix what's not broken, right? And I believe I can see fits elsewhere with the Cavs, like I said, or with the Pacers if they don't get Kyle Kuzma, right? But this is a team that just went from missing the playoffs for 16 straight years to being the 3rd seed, taking the defending champs to a Game 7. You can't just change that up, right? The culture is there, the continuity is there. Bring back Harrison Barnes, and this team should be in a great position next year, especially if all of my predictions become true, because in my scenario, the Kings would also be bringing in a Jeremy Grant, right? So you can have lineups next year of De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Grant, and Domantas Sabonis. That team is dangerous, right? Going forward, that team only gets better, right? And to me, I believe Harrison Barnes, being the veteran that he is, maybe he signs that mid-level exception, and maybe he can come off the bench next year, or he could start in that lineup like I just mentioned. Harrison Barnes is going to bring this team a lot of veteranship, a lot of versatility, some championship DNA, let's not forget. And I believe just returning is the best way to go. Why fix what's not broken, if I can talk. Jordan Clarkson, this is a guy that, I'm going to be honest with you guys, out of everybody in free agency, I had no clue where to predict Jordan Clarkson, right? I haven't seen any rumors. I haven't seen any personal connections that people are rumoring, right? Jordan Clarkson, to me, I had no clue what to do with. So to me, I believe he's going to resign on a shorter deal with the Utah Jazz. As this guy is 31, so let's not forget he's getting up there in years. No matter how you split it. But I mean, this is a guy that could be the starting two guard for this Utah team, or he can come off the bench, right? I mean, this team just brought in John Collins, so they're not going to be able to pay Jordan Clarkson tons and tons of money. But I believe if he comes back on a team-friendlier deal, he could be the starting two guard, come off the bench, do whatever, and this Utah team can really be a playoff team next season. I could see a Chicago fit, right, alongside their core of Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic. I believe, maybe he can come off the bench and replace Kobe White if they don't bring him back. But at the end of the day, I think Chicago would prefer the younger, really same production level of a guy like Kobe White. Just keep him in-house and build from there. But Miami's also another spot, and it's only really because of the Dame trade, right? So I believe if Damian Lillard is ended up traded to the Miami Heat, Tyler Hero's gonna have to be in that deal. No matter what anybody wants to tell you, Miami's gonna want to keep Damian. They're gonna want to keep Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, and if they want to bring in Dame, they're gonna have to ship out their next best piece, and that is Tyler Hero, right? And probably 10 first-round draft picks. But to me, you're going to have a void off the bench. There's not going to be that sixth man there anymore. Why not bring a guy who just won the award in Jordan Clarkson? Bring him to Miami, have him come off the bench, and then you're going to have Dame, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo with Jordan Clarkson off the bench, with Caleb Martin and all those other young pieces. I mean, Miami's just going to keep building, and they're going to be a title contender if that can happen. Of course, that's perfect scenario. Moving over to DAngelo Russell, and this might be my craziest prediction of the video, but for some reason I can just see it happening, and for some reason I'm confident in this move. I will say, before Spurs fans run to the comments, I do think that you guys will re-sign Trey Jones, right? No doubt in my mind he comes back on a restricted free agency offer, but to me, you bring in a guy like DAngelo Russell, right? DAngelo Russell can be a sixth man off the bench. He could be the facilitator in the starting lineup or off the bench. And this team is filled with young talent, right? A lot of young guys in their core that necessarily aren't the best at creating their own shot, right? So you bring in DAngelo Russell, whether if that's in the starting lineup or off the bench, he can get these young guys in their spots, help them develop offensively at least, right? And even though he's been more so of a score first guard in his career, I believe he does have the tools to be a facilitator, right? And play under Greg Popovich. But again, whether if it's starting or coming off the bench, I believe D'Lo can sign a one-year deal in San Antonio as kind of like a prove-it deal, right? Build his reputation back up to get a bigger contract. And I believe the biggest goal for San Antonio this offseason is to help Victor Wembanyama grow and become that superstar that we think he can be. I think if you bring in a guy like DAngelo Russell, a veteran, a guy that can give him advice, a guy that can also put him in his spots, as well as the other young talent on this team, I believe it's a good fit. Let me know down in the comments how crazy that is. I think it is a crazy prediction, right? But I think it's definitely, it might happen, right? DAngelo Russell to the Spurs. Moving over to the Patrick Beverly of the world, right? Over on his podcast, he said that he would announce his free agency signing there, as well as Draymond said on his. So that'll be very interesting. But Patrick Beverly, I could see tons of places for Patrick Beverly, right? Whether if it's Chicago, returning there to his hometown team, or going to the Boston Celtics, right? Or going to another team, right, that needs a point guard. But to me, Phoenix makes perfect sense for both sides of it, right? As Phoenix, they bring in much-needed defense and a vocal leader, most importantly for DeAndre Ayton. I believe that's going to be a huge piece for them. And Patrick Beverly, he can start at that one, or he can come off the bench, whatever Phoenix wants to do. But I believe he's a perfect fit vocally for this team going forward, right? And plus, for Pat Bev's side of things, you sign on a contender, a team that has maybe the most talent in the NBA, but you also don't have to worry about guarding guys like Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, right? You don't have to worry about guarding those guys 5 to 10 times a season because they're on your team, right? They're on your team, and Pat Bev can also bring much-needed defense to a team with their star players don't necessarily have that. But he would complete the starting lineup. You'd have a Patrick Beverly, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Ayton starting five. That's championship quality if you ask me. Dennis Schroeder, I believe, will return to the Los Angeles Lakers. D'Lo, like I just mentioned, he most likely won't be back in a Laker uniform. And the Lakers are going to need a point guard, right? So why not bring back yours? Why not bring back some continuity in Dennis Schroeder, as he's a very underrated player. But if Schroeder wants to compete, I mean, he has a couple options, right? He can go to the Suns on a mid-level exception and be that guard in that lineup instead of Patrick Beverly. I mean, he can go to Boston, right, and be a starting point guard for them. But why not try and stay in LA where you know your role, right? You have some flexibility there in that starting lineup. Why not just stay there and help LeBron get his 5th ring? I mean, at the end of the day, right? Gabe Vincent, to me, he's going to return to Miami unless the Damian Lillard trade goes through, and in that case, he would be, of course, in Portland. But, I mean, he's still a solid starting point guard that was giving them 25-point scoring nights throughout this playoff run, and he was really a big reason why they won some games, as he was some nights their leading scorer. But the culture in Miami is simply different. We all know that. They have the best culture in sports, probably, at the Miami Heat. But, I mean, if this guy's not traded to Portland, why change, right? Why go away from your first starting position that you had this year? Return to Miami, continue to be the starting point guard, and continue to help Jimmy Butler and them compete at a high level, right? Because we've seen last year they weren't a true 8 seed, right? Kelly Oubre, as a Cavs fan, I mean, again, I would love this, but I know the Cavs aren't built like that. They're not going to make this happen. They're not going to be aggressive and get a piece that they need to really compete at a high level. But to me, Kelly Oubre, he can return to Charlotte as why fix what's not broken for personally for Kelly Oubre. I mean, this is a guy that's bounced around the league, but he really played his best career basketball in these last couple years with the Charlotte Hornets, right? And I believe if he returns this year, whatever the money is, his starting spot will be waiting for him, right? We know that Kelly Oubre and the Charlotte Hornets team, or for Charlotte, right? We'll speak on them personally. We know that they are going to bring back Miles Bridges, right? But are they going to bring back P.J. Washington? You know, that's still up in the air. Most likely they will, but regardless, I believe, Kelly Oubre can return. He can still be the starter. LaMelo should be healthy. They're bringing in Brandon Miller, so that's going to bring a dynamic front court there with Kelly Oubre and Brandon Miller. Not to mention, I mean, Charlotte can give them just the most money out of any team in the league. So again, I'd love to see that the Cavs get aggressive here, bring in a guy like Kelly Oubre, a nice two-way player for the Cavs. But I think at the end of the day, he'll return to Charlotte on a longer deal, maybe a deal that we were like, man, he got paid way too much. But if you're in Charlotte's position, you have to overpay. And then finally here for the big name free agents, but Dillon Brooks, a guy I wanted to talk about. But Dillon Brooks, I mean, he wants more than a mid-level exception, and he wants to compete, right? Houston is not a team that's set to compete, but they do have the money, and they've shown somewhat relevant interest there in Dillon Brooks. So I'm not too sure that Dillon Brooks is the right veteran presence you want around your young core. But I mean, Houston has the money to bring in a veteran on a mid-level exception, maybe just for 1 year. Why not bring Dillon Brooks in, have him be that defensive menace, be a vocal leader, at least defensively? And, I mean, hey, you bring in Fred VanVleet, you bring in Dillon Brooks. Those guys can be veteran leaders for your young core, at least going forward. More so Fred VanVleet than Dillon Brooks, but you guys get the point, as they can sit there and spend the money on Dillon Brooks if they wanted to. Some other notable free agents, and these I didn't really pay too much attention to, so, a lot of these guys, it could be a crazy take, but it's just some fits that I would like to see, right, at the end of the day. As, again, Trey Jones, I believe he's going to return to the Spurs. Karis LeVert, I can see going either with the Cavs again, as the Cavs have been rumored to give him $15 to $18 million roughly per season. Hopefully, the Cavs don't give him that much money, but I guess you got to do what you got to do, right, for a guy like Karis LeVert. Max Strus, I could see going to the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers have shown the absolute most interest in Max Strus, and they're going to give him a bigger offer than Miami, is what's reported, right? So, I mean, if Max Strus leaves Miami, I could see him going to Indianapolis. So that team, hypothetically, I have them also getting Kyle Kuzma. So, let's put it this way. That team can have a lineup of Tyrese Halliburton, Max Strus, Kyle Kuzma, Jalen Smith, and then Miles Turner off the bench, or Miles Turner at the 5, and then you can have Ben Mathurin off the bench. So I mean, that team could be in a very good position to compete and be a playoff team next season. But I can also see a Miami return. I can also see a Miami fit with Karis LeVert or Josh Richardson. But if Josh Richardson, he's a veteran two-way guard, if he wants to compete, Phoenix is his best bet, right? I think we can see a lot of veteran guys going to Phoenix this offseason to try and get their ring. Kobe White, I think, will return to Chicago on a team-friendly or as a restricted free agent. Lonnie Walker is a guy that, again, if Tyler Hero was traded for Dame, I could see Lonnie Walker being a guy that goes to Miami to, I guess, rebuild his image back up around the league, maybe build himself up to a point where he can get more money, right? But I can see him going there on a one-year deal off the bench if Tyler Hero's traded to just be a shot creator for that Miami team. Dante DiVincenzo, I can see him going a lot of places, right? Phoenix, the Lakers, multiple places. But to me, I, for some reason, want to see a Timberwolves fit for Dante DiVincenzo, right? Because you can have him next to Ant, right, with Karl Anthony Towns and with Rudy Gobert and with the other pieces they have. I think Dante DiVincenzo would be a nice fit there in Minnesota. Let me know what you guys think about that. But Matisse Thybulle, I think no matter what happens with Dame, he will be back in a Blazers uniform because he's not going to get a big offer from another team. So Matisse Thybulle is going to be back in a Trailblazers uniform. The most interesting thing, I think, on this list, and the one I think I'm most confident in, is Seth Curry going to the Golden State Warriors. I mean, this is a team that might have lineups where Chris Paul is off the bench, right? So you pair a Chris Paul with a Seth Curry, right? Not to mention Seth Curry's brother is maybe the greatest point guard of all time. It's Steph Curry, right? So you reunite the brothers. They were once teammates on the Warriors. They are now, again, teammates on the Warriors in this scenario, and he's a guy that can replace Dante DiVincenzo, right? And he can come in and play in certain lineups with Klay and Steph, or he can play with Chris Paul off the bench. I think he brings them a lot of three-point shooting, fits the culture, and there's got to be a lot of chemistry there with the two brothers, right? Cam Reddish to Cleveland. I'd love to see that fit. It's a fit that I wanted on draft day a couple years ago. But maybe we can finally get that to happen. Bruce Brown's maybe the biggest name on this list, and I think he goes back to Denver. No shock there, right? The Lakers have shown interest, but the Lakers show interest in everybody. He goes back to Denver. Herb Jones to New Orleans. I mean, P.J. Washington to Washington. It just made sense because Washington, I mean, they need young talent, right? Why not go out there and offer a guy like P.J. something? Maybe you can get some untapped potential out of him. And, I mean, Washington to Washington. I mean, it makes the most sense. Grant Williams to Boston, Jalen McDaniels to San Antonio, a nice lengthy wing. I think that leaves Philly to go to San An because San Antonio can pay him a little bit of money, and then you can have him next to Victor Wembanyama. You can have him next to Jeremy Sohan and Devin Vassell, right? And you're just gonna have a ton of length out there. Pause, but you're gonna have a lot of length on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that's a great fit next to Victor Wembanyama. Jay Crowder, which I didn't know he had I didn't know he was restricted, right? But I guess that makes sense why Milwaukee would trade 5 seconds for him if he was restricted. I think he returns to Milwaukee. He's going to have a somewhat of a bigger role, right? Or maybe not. Maybe he continues to cry as a veteran. But Jay Crowder should be back in Milwaukee. Josh Okogie will be back in Phoenix, I believe, on a shorter deal, maybe a 2-year, $6 million deal, something small. But he can come back and be a useful wing off that bench for Phoenix. And finally, Thomas Bryant. I mean, Thomas Bryant is a guy that went from playing okay minutes with the Lakers to not playing at all on the championship team in the Nuggets, right? So, I mean, I think he goes to a team like the New Orleans Pelicans, right? In this case, they would also get Herb Jones. But, I mean, on paper, if Zion Williamson is healthy and he's not dealing with baby mama issues, the best fit around Zion is a stretch 5. Thomas Bryant can do that, right? And he can also play some okay defense on that side of the ball coming off the bench for Jonas Valanciunas. I think it's just a good fit, right? Because Larry Nance might not come back this offseason for the New Orleans Pelicans. But that's going to do it for today's show as we ran through about the top 40 or 45 free agents, right? We went through a bunch of them. But let me know down in the comments what your favorite fit is or what your favorite fit is, right? What's your best prediction here aside from the obvious couple at the top of the list? What is your favorite prediction or what do you want your team to do? What's a pipe dream for you this offseason? But that's going to do it as we're on the road to 500 subs on the channel. We'll be back tomorrow with some fantasy football content. And then, I mean, hey, we're heading into another weekend, right? We've been doing this for 9 months with 4 straight uploads a week. I mean, we don't stop over here, right? At least I don't stop, all right, over here at the Anomaly Podcast. But we will see you guys next Tuesday, which will be the 4th of July after tomorrow's episode. And hopefully you guys have some fun stuff planned for this weekend, right? But without further ado, I'll see you guys tomorrow for some fantasy content. Stay happy, stay healthy. We're out.